Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Garry Noland's Artist Talk. So, just a little bit about Studios Inc. We are a 501c3 nonprofit supporting mid career artists with studio space and exhibition opportunities. I'm Jade Biala. I'm the assistant gallery manager and staff writer, and we are joined with Aurora and Elise, too, who are helping out. So, what we'll do first is I'll ask Gary a couple of questions, and then we can open it up to audience questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand. And Elise has a microphone. We'll pass it to you so you can be heard on the recording. So, first, Gary, could you tell me a little bit about your method of collaging that you have here?
Well, before I get started with that, I
Yeah,
want
you have
to
a
thank
quote.
you people for doing all this work for me. And I want to thank Connie, my wife, who's like been through this through thick and thin and all of that. And it actually just appeals to something that Brandan Griffin wrote in his essay about like the concept of a solo show. And it's just obvious that this is just my work here. It's been other people's work that got my work here. And like I'm talking like about family and mentors, teachers, colleagues, friends. So it's just not like a solo show. It's kind of like a end or a byproduct to this point. So I just like wanted to say that. But you were asking about the collage process. It it's depending on if we expand the idea about collage. It's not just about like gluing paper or, collage is from the French word to glue or to paste. And so it's way beyond that. So it's like even if you go back into our genetic makeup, we're collages of all of our ancestors. So it's just like everything's a collage. There's not really like one of anything, like unless it's the verb. That's the big connector. So I have lots of different materials in the studio. A lot of people would like qualify it as trash. A lot of the stuff that I have in studio, I grab things up off the floor and clean it off and reuse it for another piece. So it's like I'm kind of tied into the beginning of pieces, but like I never know what the end is going to be. So that's what I'm excited about the verb. And I mean, they really are just they are collages, and I work on several different bodies of work at the same time simultaneously. Like a good thing for me to keep in mind is that if I have a show like this, I would like for it to look like it's a 2 or 3 person show or a group show. It's because I don't want to be just like one thing. We don't want our situations or our relationships to be just one thing. So why should our studio practice be just one thing? So I am going to like move around between different bodies of work that kind of envelop that idea. Because that's if nature is the real artist, then that's how nature works. Nature makes a salamander and nature makes the Rocky Mountains. So it's really just that verb that is the similarity between them and not necessarily the object. So I give very little countenance to the object or the noun of the thing, but I do pay attention to the verb of the making.
Yeah.
So
Great. And then I want you to tell me a little bit about how your collaboration with Brandan Griffin came about. For those of you who don't know, Brandan is a local writer and also part owner of New Material Books.
um, Brandon and his partner Hannah operate New Material Books in the West Bottoms. They moved to Kansas City a couple of years ago, and I just think they're an amazing addition to our situation around here. But I just popped the question on Brandon if he would think about writing an essay for this show, and he said yes. And we agreed on his payment, and he put out this thing that it makes me think that I think he knows his work better than I do. He made me feel like I was the sequoia and that he was John Muir. He took off from this work into places that I like hadn't thought about in a realistic way. Sure. Okay. Yeah. We don't bite. Okay. No, that's right. So it's really it is about a partnership. And he did an interview with me that's going to be in Bomb Magazine on July 1. That he's a partner in the situation. And we find these people in our groups that we really start to click with, and that makes it all the better.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to there was a couple of things that I wanted to get out that I would regret if I didn't say, and it's just about like the concept of love in the work. It's I don't think we talk enough about love, like in the art world, but it's like all over, and it's like love for the culture, and it's like loving enough to carry on from one generation to the next. And you know, I think each time, like I glue a piece of this paper down, which are these, by the way. It's just another form of that common labor, that factory workers go through, that people just go through on a day-to-day basis about how do we solve the problems of the day. And so this is how I'm doing that. And ironically, the other one thing I wanted to talk about is plagiarism, and not like in the detrimental sense of it. But there was an article in New Yorker, um, March 22nd, 2026, called "Copy That" by Anthony Lane. I could send people a link, but it talks about plagiarism, like what's the difference between plagiarism, what's the difference between stealing, what's the difference between inspiration, and it's kind of blurry around all that stuff. So I sent a copy of this article to my friends in my building. They all share one studio: Annie Demers, Sage Oswald, and Jackson Dowdy. And we talked about plagiarism like for a little bit. And then Jackson came over and he said, well, what you do is you're hacking yourself. And that is totally right. And we just don't realize it at the time, but like that piece there is from 1979. And so it's like the system or the language, or I wouldn't call it an aesthetic, just like a job. The job I was doing there is like this. And so in a sense, this piece from 2026 is answering those questions. And so the newer work is answering the call from like almost 40 years ago. And that is sort of like deja vu in reverse. It's almost like being your own grandparent about finding out what you need to know from like an older version of yourself. And regarding the plagiarism, on the wall, other side of this wall here, are 4 quilts or 4 rag rugs that my great grandmother made. maybe in the 1970s, and we've always kept those around our home. And obviously, they've crept into how I see and do things. But it just didn't occur until recently that I thought, Estella Rennick was doing everything that an artist does, but she never would have called herself an artist. And that just gets back to the common labor of things, like how do we do things, day to day.
Yeah. And speaking of Estella, how have you found your community, your family impacting your studio practice?
Um, well, it's just everybody in my family goes to work every day.
Mhm.
And I've had I had an hourly paying job from from when I was 14 and a half up until not that long ago. So I mean, it's just work, and you figure out how to divide your domestic life up to your so-called professional life, and you just like find a way to make it work. So, and the other thing about creativity, if we can like expand that out a little bit and just say that like our creativity as artists is what like normal people call like creative problem solving, then we're all just kind of like doing the same thing.
Mhm.
It's just that we, for some reason, artists have allowed ourselves to be elevated above the general population, and I just like believe it's to our detriment.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answers your question or
No,
not, but
yeah,
that's where it
it
went
totally
with it.
does.
Uh, I'd be happy to take some comments or
Yeah.
anything about ideas like people have. I'll start. Yeah, John, I haven't seen you in years. Well, I was so excited to come because I hadn't seen you in a long time. And my first encounter with you, and correct me if I'm wrong, was at the Late Show. Tom gave you a show, and they were what was it, the magazine? They were tied together. Yeah, the National Geographic magazines, yes, right? Yes, and they were yellow and orange and really warm colors. Yeah, and that has never left my memory bank. I think about that show all the time. Thank you. And 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 then regarding plagiarism, the most notorious plagiarist in the Western canon said genius is always original even when it steals. Yeah, that's Picasso. I think that quote's in that article. Is it? By the way, and yeah, I appreciate. But I love that work. Thank you. Yeah. There's a piece from that series on the other side of this wall over here. See that? There's a piece over there from 2003. That's from 1979. There's a couple of other pieces like from 2013 or so, and plus my great grandma's rugs. It's like our future is present. It's like our present is also in the past, and so that's why I want to have all the work around just to get across that idea about like the verb of the making and the verb of like consistency. Well, one more thing. When I just want to respond to the urgency of what constitutes making art. And my definition of art is any action that celebrates the truth of the imagination. Yeah. So it just about includes every damn thing you do. Well, it's just definitely discovery because those three pieces on the long wall over there, those happened like accidentally as I was painting these cutout shapes on old maps, and all of a sudden they started to turn into paintings too. So it was the daily action that caused that to happen, which again is sort of like that deja vu experience, because it means if we're making art on the way to making art, and that's like a big plus.
Absolutely.
It becomes like super efficient, and there's just no waste there. So I think an artist sometimes has to remember that the end goal is somewhere in the middle.
Your question.
Yeah.
So I have two questions. One is I'm curious about your palette because I noticed that there is a similar kind of golden quality to the cues in the photo collages and in these larger collages. And so I'm curious about how you think about color in your work. I'm also wondering about figuration and if you think of these as figurative.
Uh, yes and yes. The you know, I don't make up any colors of my own. Um, like in the collages, they're all like 1960s colors, and so that's like a certain palette. That's something that ad agencies or trends, people who decide trends, came up with. It also has something to do with the offset lithography process of the time. So that's automatically like a nostalgic, like kind of a color. And so that brings up another topic, but uh, that's like found color. I was like looking for a situation. It's like I'm a sucker for a landscape. And it's like, how can I alter those situations to critique it and also augment it at the same time? But as far as the color goes, I don't, I mean, it's not exactly a manufactured or machine made color, but it kind of is. And so, I mean, I do mix these up and I do cut out the shapes before I put the color on there. And that was sort of inspired by Matisse. But I care about color, but I don't try to be the boss of it. I just want it to be like all over the place, like the leaves on a tree are all over the place.
To some extent, but there is like light. And so when you have a gray day or a sunny day,
Yeah,
and you did select very specific colors.
yeah. I do try to find. I wish that there was a process to this, something that I could predict, but like I'm running out of this color, so I'm going to get something close to that kind of a blue, but it's just not going to be exact. And people are sometimes curious about the. I mix baking soda in with a pigment just because it kind of distances the color from us. It adds like a little bit of texture that's not like brushwork that just like seems too easy. But that's not something I thought of on my own. It was in a book about South American abstract painters, and they were mixing baking soda in with their oils and acrylics. And I thought, well, try that. And it makes for a texture on the work. I encourage everybody to do this. It's just like but I had to put my hands on them to make them. You know what I mean? But there's just something that's physical and tactile, and just not optical about the work that I also want to happen. What was your other thing?
Oh, do you think of these as figurative?
Oh, I absolutely do, uh, because it took a figure to make them. So it's just a result of that. It's a result of that figurative action, And so even like the most abstract things or non-objective things, like are figurative in that sense.
Did you have a question?
Gar-
Hi, I just was hoping if could you talk a little bit about that sculpture and the importance or the the evidence of labor in your work, whether that's important or not.
Well, it is sculptural, but I don't know if it's a sculpture. You know, I do it. It's not here with the intent of it like being an object, but I did want to subtly or otherwise get people to think about like how the work is done. And like I said earlier, all these are like cut out and it resulted in those paintings on that far wall over there. But it just gets, it would be like taking, you see a new Ford in the parking lot, but you don't really get it until you like walk through the Ford assembly plant and see how the stuff is being made. And so this is a little bit like that. I wanted to bring a little bit of what is in my studio, and this came like right out of the studio, and put it here as a demonstration of some part of the working method. And so that's all about the verb of art making, about the cutting, the painting, the drawing, the gluing, the placing. So that's like 5 or 6 actions right there, times 1,000. So it really is like factory work like that. That's what that's here for, is to talk about. I mean, even though it is an object, but it's like all about the verb of the making.
Yes. Could you take us through this? Where was the first tile laid in this piece? How did that progress?
Well, the first thing, this piece was a piece of paper-lined Tyvek that I found at the intersection of Van Brunt and I-70. And so it's like I circled back around and grabbed it because, it was craft paper lined, it was like ready to go. So, I brought it into the studio and I put gesso on it. And then the first thing that happened was I put in these borders. And, the borders are not dividers, really. They're not like meant to contain anything that's on the interior, but they are meant to be a different aspect of the overall design, that like getting in the relationship of the parts to the whole. And on that piece that's on the outside over there on the title wall from 2003, there's a very similar border on that, about how like things just keep finding different ways to happen. But since these shapes are like going up, um, I'd start at the top and like come down so that there would be like an appropriate overlap. So I didn't want to have like exposed edges. So all the other ones were made earlier, with all those shapes coming down, like shingles or water drops on a windshield, or something like that. And decided to switch it around a little bit and go the other direction.
Well, they speak to each other.
Yeah, for sure they do. There's one coming along in the studio now that's sort of similar to that one, where the pieces are getting smaller, and they're squeezing together. Then they're going to like shoot up, like up through the middle like that.
So, hi, Gary. First, thank you for being so whole in front of all of us for so long.
Thank you.
But I've been thinking about because I've had the fun and joy of watching your work for a really long time. And what I'm seeing now is something that wasn't visible to me earlier, which is there's something there about the relationship between materiality and location. Something almost uh, map like,
Yeah.
but also tactile.
Yeah.
And as a museum person, I cringe when you're touching your things,
Yeah.
but but I'm wondering if you could talk about that relationship between being located, and you've been so located here in
Yeah.
every way through relationships, and then what that has to do with the materiality
Yeah.
of art.
The grid is a tricky thing. And we organize our globe with overlapping grids, the lines of the latitude, uh, and what it's trying to do is contain that ever-changing drawing that the globe is. The coastlines change minute by minute, but we never notice. Or like an iceberg will calve off, and that's not part of the plan. As far as a map goes, all of a sudden that changed everything. And if the ocean levels rise, then that's going to alter the coastlines like all over the planet. So that's like a process-oriented work of art, the globe. And so somehow, to find out where we are on the globe, we use the X and Y thing in with a grid to manage that situation that's like fairly unmanageable. And so I think it's just like the work recognizes that part of the problem. And my work is, as you know, is like use maps, like from the very beginning. And I think there's just something to that. Like, how do we, like, my great grandma, when I was a boy, told me that she thought I was going to be an artist. And so it's like, that's a situation like, even when we're young like that, we're just wondering, what are we going to do? How do we fit in? How are we going to be able to do what we need to do? What's my role? And so we're all on some kind of individual map. And like I said, I'm a sucker for landscape, and that's also about finding a place and how can we like alter that situation, augment it, but critique it at the same time. So I think it's a complex answer, but it's not a complicated answer. It's just about finding where we are, where we've been.
Any other questions?
Oh, I know what I want to say.
Gary has a question for himself.
Yeah, I've got a question myself. The that article that I talked about, Anthony Lane goes on talking about plagiarizing and self-plagiarizing. It's like he writes, we have a word in English for self-plagiarizing so habitual and so fruitfully evergreen that it becomes the mark, the smack, if you will, by which an artist is recognized and loved. And he says we call it style. And so it's like we do like invest in ourselves over time. And we just like all of a sudden it's like the style. And maybe nobody recognizes it, but it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks.
I've thought about that word forever, and I don't know if I read it or it's the product of my own imagination. But style is infinite specificity, and I think that's parallel to what you're
Yeah, it's a great article.
Yeah. So, and I keep wondering about finding a form. Finding a form.
Well, somebody came up at the opening and wondered if they thought that this was a garment, you know, like maybe a clerical robe or something. I guess maybe because of these cutouts, and maybe somebody could drape this around them, you know, like that.
The Inca, in
Yeah.
Machu Picchu.
Yeah, anything clerical. Yeah.
Okay. So but they're really happy naked. And I must say, you are so placid and full of light. I'm just, it's just a delight to be around.
Thank you, John. Same.
I think that's a great note to end on. Let's give Gary a round of applause. Feel free to stick around, chat with
Yeah.
Gary. We have some coffee and some snacks back there. And
Cool.
thank you for coming.